So hello to our viewers watching at home and welcome to another Nova Alumni Talks. Today with me here I have Lura Pollozhani, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Graz on issues of access to citizenship for different groups. She is also one of the co-founders of Stella Network, which is a nonprofit organization and a mentorship network that seeks to support girls and women in their access to education and their entrepreneurial opportunities. She also has experience working for the Prime Minister of North Macedonia. However, she is currently working in Graz. Hello, Lira, and I'm very excited to be interviewing you today.
Hi, and I'm very, very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm excited to hear your questions and see what I can answer.
So my first couple of questions are going to be regarding your experience at Nova. So what motivated you to apply and attend Nova and choose this high school instead of others that you may have been considering?
Right. You're taking me a long way back, but I remember everything Nova related, maybe because it was a very formative time in my life, and a positive formative time where I've made great friends and I've learned great things. So perhaps that's why I remember. So I'll be able to answer this. I actually decided to join Nova because at the time I was moving from Struga because I grew up in Struga, close to the lake. And my family had decided to move to Skopje, and my dad had asked me, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to a private school? Do you want to go to, some other school? What private school would you prefer if you wanted that? And I chose Nova because at the time it seemed like it was the best option, considering that I really wanted to study in English. I really wanted I was, I guess, craving for something new and perhaps with a more critical approach. I had been very stressed in my early years because I never knew exactly what I was and whether I was intelligent or not, or, shy or not, and things like that. So I thought maybe changing environments completely would be, since I was already moving to a new city, then why not really change everything? So that's why I decided that Nova would be the best option. And I really liked my first visit there and my first talks there. It really gave me kind of the sense that it could be a place where I could form a community. And yeah, and then that turned out to be true. I did form a community that has kind of sustained me up to present times. I have friends from Nova that I'm still very close friends with, and I'm still in close contact with some of the teachers as well. So I think that first impression was a winning impression, let's say.
Yes, I definitely agree. I think Nova has also helped me form like a very good group of friends. So I'm very thankful for that. So when did you exactly attend Nova, and what is your fondest memory of the place?
I attended Nova 2004, 2008, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if I'm making myself older or younger, but yeah, I think, I started 2004. My fondest memories, to be honest, there's a lot, but I think one of the things I really, really, really loved was we were doing community service hours. We were doing CAS, or in IB terms, it's CAS, right? Community Action Service. So we were doing CAS at the 11th of October orphanage. And we had decided that we were gonna collect money during the parent-teacher conference out of nowhere. We weren't even given prizes. We just had this huge kind of poster where people could sign if they donated and write something, and we would put stars to the ones who donated more money. But in the end, we ended up making quite a good amount of money. And with that, we decided to buy gifts for Christmas and New Year's for the children at the 11th of October orphanage. And just, oh my God, the happiness in their faces is something I will never, ever forget. It was truly an amazing experience. I really loved doing community service. I don't know if that's a loser thing to say, but I really, really enjoyed those activities. And that must be one of my favorites, just because it felt like connecting to the community, doing something that you could see the result of immediately, right? Because at Nova, with exams, especially like when you do IB and things like that, you have like 2 years and you have to see how the end result looks like, and sometimes it feels daunting, and you also feel isolated, right? Like you're in a bubble, whereas these kind of community service things really help to see how you could, you know, do something for others, and I really enjoyed them. That's one of my brightest memories, I think.
That's great. So were you taking the full IB diploma or maybe some AP subjects? And how do you think that this decision maybe influenced your later studies or helped them?
I didn't do AP because I had decided on doing the IB exactly at the right time, I guess. So at that time I was only doing IB. I don't know if it was even possible when I studied to do both. I don't remember, because we were the first generation of IB students at Nova, and that carried a lot of stress because we were learning, but also the teachers were learning. So we were kind of all learning by doing and kind of testing it out. And we didn't know perhaps exactly what we had to do. And we got that sense. Sometimes it also from the teachers, of course, they had some of them had training beforehand, and some of them had carried the training to those who hadn't had the training. But basically, I loved the concept that the IB offered, whereby you had kind of a more, at least to me, it looked like a more structured thing, but also within that structure, you were able to play around a little bit. I also loved the courses we were being offered at the time. I remember then, for example, it was my first time at Nova that I studied my mother tongue. Before that, it wasn't an option, and then it became an option, and then I think it became an option for everybody in all years, my mother tongue being Albanian. And I also liked, for example, the English class and the language courses and the way that they handled literature and books I really loved. And I thought it still allowed me some space to decide what I wanted to do next. Whereas I felt because I still wasn't sure. So whereas I felt with the AP, like you had to have, and this is a personal view, that you had to have more of a vision or where you're taking your life. With IB, I thought that you could still play around and see exactly where you fit in. So in that sense, it helped. It also helped me obviously write essays. I think essays
Definitely.
is one of the things that is kind of the good thing, but also the detrimental thing of the IB.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I don't remember, like sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, we just wrote too many essays. And I don't know if I would let my daughter go through that, or my son. I don't have children, but if I did, I think about it sometimes. But basically, I think the culture of writing, and even though it was a lot of writing sometimes, it did prepare me for university years, where a lot of things that you do are basically honing in your writing skills. So in that sense, it helped me a lot. And it helped me a lot also in my professional life, because I've continued to be in fields where I have to kind of put out papers, whether it be in terms of policy or in terms of kind of more analytical and academic work. But that has always meant that, you know, it's one deadline after the next. And in each of these deadlines, you have to write a crazy amount of pages. And I think having had that kind of discipline that I developed at Nova with the IB has definitely helped, because I've never felt, you know, no matter how overwhelming all these deadlines can get, I've always felt this idea that, you know, it's doable. Because, you know, if you can survive IB, you can survive anything.
Definitely. And I believe that with the writing skills, especially with the extended essay, which is like a 4,000 word paper, I think you definitely develop not only writing skills, but also research skills for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, where did you attend college and what was your major? And how do you believe that the college admission process was like for you? Was it difficult, or was it something that you believed you could handle more easily?
Right. So for my undergrad, I went to Sweden at Malmö University. How I ended up applying in Sweden is a conundrum. I still do not understand, but I think it was a lot of things happening at the same time, kind of synchronicity. But I'm very happy I went there because it offered at the time free education for international students in English, which was perfect. But also it opened me to a completely different way of thinking, in the sense that the Swedes are very different from us Balkan folks, just in the way that they view the world, and also from Americans, because at Nova you get inundated also with kind of an American way of life and a way of thinking, which of course in Scandinavia is, it's the complete opposite. If anything, at times I felt relaxed, and that bothered me because you had time to write your essays. But in terms of the admission process, I think it was, again, easier. One of the mistakes I did is that I got very carried away with the IB tasks, that I forgot to mind my deadlines for university. And again, as I said, I was still unsure whether I wanted to pursue law, for example, or something more international, or, at one point even English and literature was circulating. I kind of left it up to the end. So that was a bit stressful, and I haven't done that since. So when I applied to graduate school and to postgrad, I made sure to give myself time to apply. But for my undergrad, I did make that mistake, also because I do think IB can be overwhelming sometimes. And especially when you have to think of all these exams that you do. I think it's good to already, develop some sort of strategy just to make it easier on yourself. And of course, every individual is different and works differently. And I'm sure now, I already see that Nova also offers much more support in terms of admission counseling, and that's great. But yeah, for me, it would be important that you have some idea. I do think, if I could give an advice to my younger self, it would be to stress less about the outcome of some things, or about some things not going the way you want. Education can be as long a process as you want, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the first thing that shocked me when I went to Sweden is that in my group of friends, for example, I was, we had very different age groups. There were people who had taken gap years. There were people who had really done something else and come back to do this. And that just, to me, was immediately a lesson. Why did I stress so much and push myself so much to do things on time, and kind of develop this crazy idea of my time frame? And of course, that comes from ambition and all these things that we're told that we should feel. But I think, eventually I learned that even if at first try you don't succeed to get what you want, you still have so many opportunities to build your path. And you have so many opportunities to make yourself better, to make yourself find a niche that's targeted for you. And I found that with my educational journey, that's been very much the case. I have been able to adapt it and mold it and shape it in different ways with each gradation, which I think is a benefit also to modern and contemporary styles of education and different systems that now are kind of more conducive. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question by going in that.
Yeah, definitely. I think many students would be happy to hear that not everything has to be so linear, because the academic environment can be very, very stressful and can pose a lot of pressure on the students to complete everything in a linear manner, when for many students that is not exactly the case. Yeah. So I wanted to ask again, what was exactly your major, and what do you believe, what experiences at college were most valuable to you or shaped you most as a person and your interests?
Right. I did my BA in international relations. And there was also a very strong focus on human rights because of the nature of the program where I was at. So less political science, more human rights. And I did love that approach. At the time, it was exactly what I needed. And I think kind of starting with international relations, so although I do very little of international relations now at the moment, it really helped me kind of understand world politics better, but to also understand the intricacies of why we do what we do in terms of institutions and us being part of institutions and how they act and how they interact. And of course, this also gives you kind of insight into your own self. It also kind of opened a passion for me for minority and human rights, which is kind of a passion I have pursued throughout, whether I've been directly working on it or indirectly. It really is kind of, it developed this framework through which I could frame my activism, and I still do. But I think the most valuable thing were definitely the community again, because I think there's something that happens at university, and that's why I really hope that, you know, whenever you apply to college, you actually get to go there at this pandemic craziness is over, because that community that you create, and also the openness to different kind of ideas, it really is the thing that makes you a better thinker, a better human being, and a better activist. I was lucky enough in Sweden to have friends from everywhere. So I was exposed to very different cultures. I was exposed to, as I said, many of them had done other things or other universities, or had even gone through other paths of life and come back to international relations. So I really benefited from the idea of kind of that exchange of different kind of worldviews, and to be open to those worldviews, which sometimes hasn't been, like, you would think that that would be the case everywhere, that you would have these diverse bodies of students, but it sadly hasn't been the case. For example, for my master's, although it was diverse in the sense that many of the students were from different European countries, they were mostly from EU countries, plus the Balkans. And of course, that's like diverse, but it's a different kind of diverse, right? In terms of race, in terms also gender, it was quite equal, but in terms of kind of these more global perspectives, it was more limited. And of course, also in Austria, sadly, again, there is not as much diversity in this sense. So the kind of diverse community that I created when I was in Sweden has been, it still is quite formative for me, and it really opened my eyes to some things, because, you know, even points of reference that you think are, you know, canon, at least then we didn't have so much internet and TikToks and things for you to see how different parts of the world live their life. The internet was still, you know, a smaller community than it is now. I do remember we had started using Facebook at that point, and High Five, but still, you know, it was really one of the things that really shows you how so many things that we take for granted, and so many things we take as truths, are actually, you know, just truths within a context, but they don't have to be within and across context, right?
And yeah, I also believe that many students also, when they apply to colleges, take into account what type of community they will encounter there. And so there's a very important part of their personal development, and also like their worldviews and what people they communicate with.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask, how would you describe your career currently? And is there something that you would have done differently along the way, or something that, I don't know, you would want to focus more on?
Do differently? No, but I describe my career as very eclectic. But I think one thing that is consistent throughout is the fact that I don't like to get comfortable in a job. At least I've always said in my 20s and early 30s, or, you know, as long as I have this room to grow and change, and I, you know, not having a family, I think if I had a family, things would change, or if I also had to support a family, things would change. So I do have that luxury, but I've used that luxury to basically have a very diverse also career, in the sense that I always have tended to leave a job where I've no longer seen room for growth. So I think many people maybe aspire to be comfortable within a work condition, to get to the point where you know everything there is to know about the job, and then, you know, it becomes automatic, it becomes second nature. And of course, like, in that sense, your career can be a bit less stressful. You still have stresses, of course, but it becomes a bit more, I know this thing. Whereas for me, it's always been like, the moment I'm like, I know where this is going, I'm like, it's time to leave. Just because I've always felt that, you know, that's the only way to growth. And for me, kind of a priority in my life is just that, to grow, you know, whether sometimes it goes in a direction you didn't want. You can always say no and, you know, shift the gears. But I found it to be kind of a good principle in my life to really strive to change and to kind of shift gears from time to time, just because I don't want to always be comfortable. And I think you have to get used to discomfort in order to really discover new things and to really discover new career opportunities. I've also very often been inclined to to be kind of very open to shifting, in the sense of, you know, I've done NGO, then I've done government, then I've done international organizations, then I've done local organizations. Although, you know, I think canon knowledge used to be that you shouldn't change your job too often, and you shouldn't change your career paths too often, because you're not going to look serious, or your CV is going to look all over the place. I'm here to tell you, I have not found that to be the case. I think that's very much an old conception of how career paths were seen, but just like with education, that you can really tailor it, and sometimes it's more limited and sometimes less, depending on what you study. With careers, it's the same thing. You can mold it, you can shape it. And I think that removes a little bit of the stress of, oh my God, am I making a mistake, or did I make the right choice? But I think everything, you learn from every experience in life, good and bad. So I think now there is an acceptance that people are gonna change jobs, that they're gonna want to advance within a certain position, and if they don't, then there's the next thing. Hopefully if you have the independence, if you have also the chutzpah, the boldness to pursue it. But I think that has been kind of my development. I started with an NGO in Kosovo on minority and human rights. Then I moved back to Macedonia. Then I thought, let's try government. I tried government for a little bit. And then I also did international organizations through the UNHCR. And now I'm back to academia for a second time, because I really enjoy the academia. Like, once I stepped out of academia, the thing I found missing the most was the time to think about stuff. I think with international organizations or government or local organizations, you know, the context defines a very speedy time to do things. Even when you don't feel comfortable with the speed, or you think there should be some more thought put into some things. But I think very often the context says, you know, you want time, but I'm not giving you time. Whereas with academia, I really enjoyed that idea of really sitting down and thinking about what you're thinking about and what the consequences could be, what the strong suits and the weak suits are. And I don't know if I'm going to stay in academia forever, but I do think it has encouraged me to become a better thinker, to really think of problems in a different way, to think of solutions in a different way. So yeah, although it's been up and down and I've changed sectors very often, I don't regret, no regrets. Je ne regrette rien, as Edith Piaf would say. On the contrary, I think every experience has really taught me something valuable. Sometimes I look back even 5 years ago and I'm like, I do not recognize that Lura. But to me, that's a sign I'm doing things right. If you're growing and saying goodbye to your past selves, that's a good thing.
I definitely believe that if you maybe don't recognize who you were in the past, that's a good sign that you have grown and developed as a person. And also that philosophy of not being too comfortable, I definitely think that also in high school, for example, in CAS, as you mentioned, it's very important to build a community, but also they're encouraging us to, you know, through our activities, step out of our comfort zone. So that's what we are attempting to do now, although on a smaller scale, of course. So I wanted to ask, since we were talking about your career, what advice would you give students that want to pursue a similar field? And what do you think that it's most important for them to have as a characteristic, for example?
I think the two things. I remember once a teacher at Nova asked me what my kind of the virtue that I most preferred was, and I said courage, because I think without courage, you don't have any of the other virtues. If you don't have courage to love, if you don't have courage to be vulnerable, if you don't have courage to pursue something, even though it sounds crazy, you're not gonna go far. In the field of social sciences, of course, there's a big problem in the sense that there's so many people who pursue social sciences, right? Whether it be political science or kind of humanities even. There's a lot of very good quality people that enter the market, let's say, or pursue that sort of career. So it can be tough. My advice would always be, you know, don't smirk and say like, oh, I'm not going to work here. I want to work at this big organization in this place because that's my dream. In my kind of path, I have found that if you sometimes go for the underdog, your path to greatness or to the great organization you wanted to join is actually becomes more attainable than if you pursue that path of certainty where you know where the results are going to lead. Yeah, I mean, go for the underdog, go for the thing that you think really leads, where you can lead with passion rather than the logic of, is this going to get me to that big office or that big organization? Because that's how you become better, and that's how you can really make yourself visible in a field where there's so many brilliant people like yourself. For me, for example, right after London, I went to Kosovo because I was like, in Kosovo, I can do things that I wouldn't dream of doing in other countries, just because the market or the context is just full of people doing the same thing. Whereas there you can go and do something, advise governments, write policies, which at my age, at that point, if I had gone anywhere else, I don't think I would have been able to do, because I wouldn't have had access. There would have been too many gatekeepers. So go to the place where you think you can actually have a direct access to the thing you want to influence, rather whether it has a big name or the sexy name or whatnot. So yeah, I think always go for the underdog. It actually ends up paying more at the end and leading you towards a better career path.
So my last question for you is, because you put an emphasis on social activism, I wanted to ask, in what ways would you encourage students to pursue social activism, even though that might not be their career choice per se?
To be honest, with every passing year, it becomes so much more evident how necessary it is for everybody to be socially aware. We're living in a planet that becomes increasingly more vulnerable. So you have it vulnerable from pandemics, as we can see, from climate change, from refusal to change. So the more socially aware we become at an early age, I think being uncomfortable and being comfortable with a feeling of being uncomfortable is going to be your primal survival tool, because in an ever increasingly changing context where everybody has a voice, it's a democratic open space where sometimes it's so hard to get heard. If you learn to use your voice earlier, there's a higher chance for you to also kind of know how to use it in the future, because you get tired eventually, you get burnt out, you become jaded. In terms of activism, I think there was a passion I had before that now maybe I have less, but I have more of something else. So it's also important to hone these things in at an early age or a younger age, just because you burn out eventually and you're going to have to give space to someone eventually. So use that time where you can raise your voice and sometimes even do mistakes, because in your 20s nobody counts your mistakes, right? So really that's the time to really get yourself out there. So whether you want to be active or not, or whether you want to pursue activism or not, being socially aware is becoming increasingly a tool that's going to help you survive, because otherwise you're not going to be adaptable, you're not going to be you're going to panic when things get uncomfortable or when things get a bit ugly. Whereas if you really get into the thick of things and understand different perspectives and are able to react to these different perspectives, the better you're going to do in life later on.
Thank you. That was great advice. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for participating in this Nova Alumni Talks activity. And it was very nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me and for the great questions. And, I can already see that your mind is in the right space. But yeah, I mean, I'm so happy that students are continuing to be active at Nova. And, I really think that whatever you're doing now, even though it brings stress and even though it brings worry, it has value. And you're going to use it. Don't think you're not going to use it and you're not going to care about this in a couple of years. You are. It's just going to grow into something else. And hopefully, I'm sure it will grow into something better.
Thank you.
Good luck. Good luck with everything.